Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Samuels, Director of Alumni Programs at the UAlbany Alumni Association. I'm glad you could join us today for our program, Impostor Syndrome in Your Career. Before we get started, I wanted to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording today's session, and I will send you a link to the recording once we have it uploaded on our website. We'll also be doing a Q&A today at the end of the program. So if you have questions for our presenter, Suzanne McColl, please put the questions in the Q&A and not in the chat so we make sure that they don't get overlooked. So, all right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our presenter. Suzanne McColl is a motivational speaker, author, and transformational therapist. Suzanne is a licensed professional counselor. She's been practicing psychotherapy for over 25 years and has dedicated her expert knowledge and experience to helping people seek greater satisfaction and success. So Suzanne, we're very excited to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you. I never would have expected to be back here. I don't know how many, since 1981 I graduated, presenting. So I'm so excited to be here and to be able to offer this information to everybody who also went through SUNY Albany's education. So let me share my screen. Excuse me. Put it into present mode for you. So today I'm going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and especially and particularly how it affects people and how it shows up at work. I am since the pandemic, I started doing more of the speaking and educating people about imposter syndrome. And I've been learning a lot about it over the last couple of years. And so I want to share with people because at the core of imposter syndrome is something that we all struggle with. And I think the fact that there's so many people registered today, that it strikes a chord and that we kind of all can relate to it. So I'm a psychotherapist, and the way I like to teach is sometimes to give examples about my clients. So I work with men and women, but I'm going to talk today about a client who I'm going to call Roberta, who's a professional. She's working in a company. She is very successful supervisor. Her staff love working with her. She always gets great reviews. She's really solid in her niche in terms of what she's doing. But while I was working with her, she was also working on wanting to develop this program that would transform the way her company did things. And it's something that it could be taken out into the world and help other companies. But she never really got it going while I was working with her. She's truly a brilliant person. And I could see that from everything she would explain to me the whole time that I was working with her. But nobody really knew how brilliant she was. They knew she was good at what she was doing, but they didn't know what her potential was because she never launched it. You know, she didn't put herself out there. She didn't get her voice heard. And she was sort of racked with lots of self-doubt about how it would be perceived and welcomed. She had a lot of regret. And the reason why I want to talk to everybody today about this is because I think that there's a lot of us who have the same kinds of experiences, whether it's fear about launching a big program or just even letting your voice be heard, connecting with people at work in a different way, and holding back and regretting it because you might have ideas about where you want to go in your career, but you're not doing it because of all these fears. So today I want to talk to you about what imposter syndrome is, where it comes from, how we develop it, how it shows up at work, and then what we can do about it, because there's a lot that we can do about it. And while we're doing this today, we're going to have a few polls. And I'm going to have a couple moments of having people reflect on things. So just to try to keep things interesting. So imposter syndrome is based on beliefs that we have about ourselves. Okay, they're not truths. They're just beliefs that we have about not being good enough at something. And we all have beliefs. So whether you have mild self-doubt or full-blown imposter syndrome, it's all about that. It's all about beliefs about yourself and doubts. And it's a lot more down to earth and common than you think it is. And maybe I am speaking to the choir here. So there's a mild self-doubt that we all have at times. And this usually happens during periods of transition at work. It might have happened when you went back to work after COVID and you were trying to figure out a new way of working and making it work. But it goes away after we get more comfortable with that position. So those are just sort of the mild form of self-doubt. And then the other side of the spectrum is really what we call imposter syndrome. And it has to do with really feeling like your successes are not really because of you, because of your skills, your knowledge, and your expertise. You know, people who have imposter syndrome are afraid to let people see who they really are. So I'd like, right now, I'd like to do a poll, just a quick poll for everybody, because you may not even identify with having imposter syndrome, or you might not be sure. So I just thought we could do a poll and see what percentage and where people are at with that. It would be interesting for me, and I can share that with all of you. It's a close between occasional and frequent. Okay, very interesting. Okay, I think we're done. Yep. Okay, so 34% of people say it occasionally creeps up. 47% say they frequently feel that way. And 18% say, oh, OMG all the time. And then some never. So that's really interesting. Okay. Was I supposed to share those results? Okay, I just shared them. Okay. Great. So what's interesting is that, you know, that 48% that's, or 34 or 48% that say they feel it sometimes, that's because feeling like an imposter or having that major self-doubt is just a part of us. It's not who we are completely. We develop our identity. I'm going to talk about that. And so part of us might not be confident and sure about ourselves, but part of us are. So that's why, you know, some of the times we just use our regular coping tools and we realize that we feel good. Okay. I was trying to get a sense of what percentage of this is women and what percentage is men. I really couldn't find that, but I just wanted to share some of the very well-known people who do say that they have imposter syndrome. And before the pandemic, the numbers were more like 72%, and now they've gone up to more like 80%. And I think that has a lot to do with the changing expectations of how you're supposed to be in the world of work and all the insecurity that that's brought up. We all have been feeling it, I'm sure, and we can talk about that during the question and answers. Oop. Sorry, I skipped one. So when you have imposter syndrome, I said it has to do with beliefs, and the core domain of belief is what we call it, has to do with your sense of self-worth and your value to others. And some of those negative thoughts that come up are about not being enough, not being good enough. And that, I think, a lot of why explains we have this at work and more clearly than in our personal lives. So how do these beliefs get developed? How does this self-doubt happen? Well, we develop our beliefs and our identity from a variety of places, from the religions that we grow up with, society, what society tells you is okay, is what is possible. If you're a woman or a man, like we get these clearly defined boxes of who we can be and what's possible. Family is very, very big in this. The family is our main place where we learn who we are. So the family culture and the experiences that happen in the family. So a lot of that is just kind of normal beliefs about ourselves, and a lot of it's positive, which is why we don't have imposter syndrome like 100% of the time. Some of the other reasons have to do with trauma. That's something that I see a lot in my work, when people feel very stuck with that imposter syndrome and it really is interfering in their life. A lot of times that has to do with what we would call big T or little t traumas that people have had. You might have had, like, we all know what big T traumas are. Those are the ones that everybody knows is a trauma. Life events that happen, accidents, natural disasters, things like that. The things that are small t traumas are, you know, family that get divorced, and being a child in that kind of a family where there's a lot of conflict, bullying with peers in school. These are all very formative in terms of how we feel about ourselves and our beliefs about ourselves. So these are the times when the imposter syndrome doesn't get resolved so quickly. So what I'd like you to do now is, I'm going to tell you this. I want to tell you a little bit more, 1 second more about Roberta, and then we're going to talk more about you. So Roberta, the more I worked with her, the more I could see that her family culture was very traditional. Her mother was a stay-at-home mother. Her father went out and, you know, made the money, earned the income. And the modeling she had was that women cannot be really successful at work, you know, very high-powered professionals, and they don't have as much power. And her family also had a lot of conflict, her parents. And so that was something that was, when we have conflict, our parents, sometimes kids think it's our fault, like we're not enough. So those are some of that's Roberta. And I'm telling you, you know, about Roberta again, because those are typical scenarios, and typical, we all have a Roberta in us. So what I want you to do is take a moment to reflect again. Think about what you believe when you think about your work, how you spend your day, what are the things that you do, what are your dreams, what are your challenges? Is there a negative belief that you struggle with sometimes when you picture yourself in this setting? Just take a moment and think about that. And we're going to do a poll right now that will give us a sense of, you know, where you feel when you think about it, your beliefs came from, particularly the negative beliefs that we have. The positive ones also come from all those places. And I think we're asking to choose one thing, but I can tell you it's an influence of everything. It's hard to decide. Okay. So 7% think it's religion, 58% from society and culture. Society and culture really determines a lot of what we think is possible for us. 57 family experience, exactly. And 43% peer, There's so much influence, especially in the earlier part of our life, from all of these things. And we think that they're real, the beliefs that we develop, but they're not. They're not truths, they're just beliefs. So I think everybody did see that. Okay. So right now, what I want to talk about is, how does it show up at work? So the thing about imposter syndrome is that it's an internal experience, right? We don't walk around with a sign on our shirt saying, imposter syndrome, I'm a super achiever because feel like an imposter. We don't really always know. So we have to kind of interpret what we're seeing with what might be going on. And we know ourselves what's going on for ourselves, but we really can't know for anybody else 100%. So there's 5 different kinds of imposter syndrome, 5 types. There's the perfectionist, soloist, superhuman, genius, expert, and playing it safe. That one is a little, it's just different. So I'm going to just explain a few of these right now. Playing it safe. The main thing about imposter syndrome and people playing it safe is that they avoid stepping outside the box, taking a risk, volunteering to do a project where they might have to be, in the forefront more. They might have to talk more. There's lots of their own internal stuff going on. But they're the kind of person that, is not necessarily overly opinionated. Everyone kind of likes that person. They're best friends, but they don't really cause any waves. Then there's the superhuman type, right? This is the person who never stops working. Just seems like they work all day really hard. They're never taking a break. And they even do all that work at home. They're working late. They have a lot. What you don't know is that there's a lot going on inside about, analyzing everything that they say and do, and if people are criticizing them or not, because it's really about not wanting to have people see who they really are. And so they're always worried that that crack's gonna show through. So they don't do any socializing usually with people, and they often don't socialize as much at home. And then there's the perfectionist. The perfectionist is, well, we all know what perfectionists seem like, right? It's a stereotype that they, what happens is they spend an excessive amount of time preparing for their projects, things that they need to put out into the world. And sometimes they miss the deadlines because they feel like it's not ready. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to get started, don't want to put their ideas out there because they're afraid of failure. And you may not want to put your hat in the ring for a promotion because you feel like you're not quite there yet. Then, I combine the expert and the soloist. This is the person who learns everything. If you need to know anything, this is the person you ask, right? Because you just know that they have the information about every topic related to your job or even related to everything, because it's really important to them that they feel and that they can show you that they know a lot. And you might look at them as being standoffish or feeling like they're superior to you. But what's really underneath it is not feeling that way. It's feeling, insecure, like people are going to find out that they really they're not good enough to be doing what they're doing. So let's take another moment of reflection here. Think about yourself, how you go about your day and your work, especially when you're having those moments of imposter syndrome, lots of self-doubt and not confident about what you're doing. Which of these would you say that if you're going to go toward it, which one do you think is more likely that you're going to act like, or people are going to say, oh yeah, she's the perfectionist, or they're the expert? Which one do you know that you play it safe? You may not feel like you fit exactly into a box either, which is fine. Just sort of what you think. Okay, we're almost done. But we could probably, okay. So I think that you can see these results, but it's 31% would identify as the superhuman, 19% the perfectionist, 10 the expert, playing it safe, 38%. I know I can relate to that one. That's one that I did for many years, and I sometimes wish I could go back to doing that again, because when you do your usual thing, it feels very comfortable. And then there's like, none of the above. So the most important thing is, like, almost everybody feels that they can identify with a part of this. So also the important thing to know here is all of these skills that you and we have developed to be able to do well and feel like we're worthy. Those are all really important skills, and they do become your superpower. They really are what makes you good at what you do. We just don't want that desire, that need to be seen as worthy, to be the thing that motivates us. We want to have a choice so that we can be flexible with how we come across and what we do in our lives. Sometimes play it safe, and sometimes try to do it really perfectly. So there's 3 things that I think we should all know here. One is that self-doubt is normal. So let me just say that again, because I think that's something that we don't necessarily know and we're not taught. Self-doubt, confidence, the whole spectrum are normal. They really come as a result of everything that we go through. And every time you push and try to step outside the box, these things are going to come up. There's going to be self-doubt. And it's a normal thing. And it just shows you, one way to look at it is that you are pushing yourself beyond what you're comfortable with. You're growing. And so having some self-doubt is normal. It doesn't mean that you have to stop doing what you're doing. The second thing is, we are already worthy. We're born worthy. I know it's kind of a little woo-woo-y. I am a therapist. So I believe that we're all worthy, that we're born that way. We're human beings. Like, if you see a little baby, that baby's worthy right there, you know, from day one and on. So being good at what you do can be very different at saying, I need to prove that I'm worthy. Okay, so let's just separate that out. And number 3, the thing to know is that you're not alone. And, you know, as these numbers show, 80% of people have endorsed having what we call imposter syndrome at some time in their life. It's really common. There's a spectrum of imposter syndrome to self-doubt. And we all go through it. It's almost part of being human. So finally, what can we do about this? There's a lot we can do, and it's something that can definitely change, and we can grow. There's 3 different things that I want to talk about here. The first one has to do with the networking, joining professional organizations, having small groups at work where you work, where if you are a manager or if you are a leader in your company, to create these kinds of small groups. Employee resource groups are really important, where people are encouraged to discuss things like imposter syndrome, or how do you have confidence, or when does this come up, communication, how do we develop trust as a team. So having networks will be really important, because then you also start to hear what everybody else is going through. And you understand that this is just normal, and you start to be able to create solutions. New perspectives and brain-based techniques and therapies are the other thing that I want to talk about here. So new perspectives, right? What I mean by that is reframing how you see yourself. What is good enough? What does success mean? What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be a professional? Like reframing. I can be a professional and still need to take some time and go take care of my family. I can be a professional and a leader and still have mental health problems, for example. You don't have to be perfect. Accepting failure, and this is stuff that you might have heard before, but maybe not in the context of imposter syndrome. Failure is a normal part of trying something new, trying to do new strategies, new techniques, something new in your company or your business. It's an opportunity to learn and grow. So just normalizing it is really important. And a growth mindset. We're all here. We're good at what we do, but we can learn. I can get better at this if I want. I don't have to be perfect. I wanted to talk about comparing yourself because comparison is really, really not a good thing. We all know that when we start to compare ourselves, that's when we start questioning and doubting ourselves. And what I'd like to know is, how do you think, we're going to do a poll again, how do you feel comparison shows up in people's lives the most? Maybe your life or the people you know. So let's do a poll with that. My dog is starting to get a little, come here. Okay, so social media, 50%. On the job, a lot of comparisons happen. And friends and family, yeah. Okay. I'm not surprised. Social media is something that, social media is meant to show, what you're good at and what you feel good about. It doesn't show the other stuff. Again, people are not going to be talking about what the problems are, right? They're going to be talking and presenting more about the things that are going really well. So the third thing I want to do is just to do a little visualization and to think about that you can use this technique and strategy. This is a brain-based strategy because when you use a visualization, you're using your imagination. And when you use your imagination, your brain creates neural pathways. So what's happening it doesn't have to be what's really happening. Your brain doesn't know that. Your brain is creating neural pathways that are successful and that go along with being successful when you visualize it. So I want you to take a moment and visualize yourself succeeding at something that maybe you don't always feel comfortable with. Maybe it's going to pitch a product or cold calling, or just even picking up the phone and calling somebody in your company. And that might make you feel insecure. It could be speaking, whatever it is. Think of that and visualize it going really well. Think of a word or a phrase that represents you in that moment. Some people come up with like a name. When I did this with people once, the name I came up with was, okay, I'm going to embarrass myself, Sassy Suzanne. Okay, but when I think about that now, I feel better. I feel like I can handle things. So think of a word or a name for yourself where you are that successful person. Now, another thing that you can do is think about somebody that you admire, someone who is really good at what they do, and you want to be like that. What reason do they tell you, like, that you should be confident? What would they tell you? You know, just, you don't have to be perfect. Or what is their mantra that you think makes them feel so confident? And I want you to think about that mantra. It's a saying. Done is better than perfect. We all make mistakes sometimes. Whatever that is, I can always learn more. Marie Forleo is everything is figure outable. Say it to yourself on a regular basis, because the more you say this stuff, well, when you think about all the negative things you've been saying, they've been creating neural pathways. We want to say the positive. We want to create new neural pathways. So the more you say positive things about yourself, who you are, and how successful you can be in different situations, the more you're going to start to normally feel that way. Now, thinking about how you talk to yourself, we all have self-talk, and we do not talk nicely to ourselves. So when you hear yourself talking to yourself in those not nice ways, I want you to think about being like a coach, your own compassionate coach, and ask yourself, would I speak to a child, my child, that way? Would I tell them things like that? No, right? You wouldn't tell them, unless you're perfect, I don't want to talk to you again. In fact, if you do if that's how you grew up, that's probably part of why you have a limiting belief. So we do not want to be that way. So let's imagine talking to yourself with a more compassionate voice. I don't have to be perfect to be really good at what I do. Everyone has room to grow. I can use my resources to learn and get support. Think about these things, and self-talk and being compassionate is really important when it comes to taming imposter syndrome. So what are the benefits of taming imposter syndrome? I'm calling it taming because it doesn't always go away completely. You're going to start to see yourself in a less judgmental way, as well as everybody in your company. People are going to trust you more, because even if you're not putting your judgments on them, people feel it, or you might not be as open and transparent with people because you're hiding, right? But they don't know why. They're just kind of making assumptions. But so people will start to trust you more. You'll have better relationships with people at work and with networking groups, which all of this is going to allow you to have clearer and more frequent communication. You won't be holding back as much. You'll be asking for clarification more and not being afraid to do that. You'll be taking more risks, which means you can be seen more as the expert, and you're more likely to get promotions. You're going to be more productive because you're spending less energy worrying and focusing about not being good enough. And the other thing that I see is that when my clients do work with me and they resolve all those traumas and those negative beliefs that they have, now they're able to use all those strategies they've been working on developing their whole life. Because if you're a professional, you've probably been working on that, right? You've probably been trying to learn new techniques, better time management, better communication, and there's a million different ways of trying to get better skills. But you'll be able to use them more when you resolve that imposter syndrome. So my client, Roberta, the last I heard from her, she had brought her project public. Her whole company's using it now, and now they're paying for her to go out and do talks, and other companies are paying for her to come and talk to them about how to implement the program in their companies. She has really been able to tame that imposter syndrome and get herself to a place where she feels better. And that's why I'm talking about her, because I want everybody else to think about themselves, that we all have that Roberta inside of us. So ask yourself, what is it that you would do if you didn't have imposter syndrome? Or in those times when you don't have imposter syndrome, what would you do differently? How would your life be different? What would you try that you're not letting yourself try? So I want you to keep in mind here, right, that we're already worthy. You've done a lot of work to get where you are. You're worthy of success in your career, in your business. And the self-doubt is really just a belief that does not need to be there. I have a quiz that you can take. It's on my website, about imposter syndrome. So we'll put it in the, Melissa will send it to everybody when she sends a follow-up email. You can go on my website and take it and see what you think. So I'm a therapist. I want everybody to know that there's different things that you can do when you want to try to understand imposter syndrome, what might be holding you back. There's a lot we can do when it comes to just reading, taking online courses that are, small, but specific to the topic you're looking at. So what I do is I have a book, I have an online course that I've created that people can use to try to understand this stuff a little bit more, to get a beginning understanding. I do EMDR, which is a trauma-based therapy that is for performance enhancement with people, and that's very effective. And if I do these talks, so if anybody has any interest in having me come and speak to their group, I'd be happy to do that. So I think this is my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. Okay. And well, thank you, everybody. I hope this was, I didn't even get to look at the chat while we were
Well, that's okay. I was looking at it and responding to a few things, Suzanne.
Okay,
So
good.
it looks like we're ready for Q&A, and we do have quite a few questions in the Q&A.
Happy to answer them.
So let me share a couple of the questions. A couple of them had to do with the different types of imposter syndrome, superhuman, perfectionist, and whether one can be a mix of both.
Absolutely.
Or more than one.
Absolutely. It just depends on the situation. You can be definitely a mix. At different times, you might decide, I'm going to try to compensate with this by being superhuman and just working nonstop. Mm-hmm. And at other times, you're in more of a state of playing it safe. So it depends on where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish and work on at the time. And so you can have different types.
Right. So Matt would like to know, what can I do as a manager to help an employee that I think is really dealing with imposter syndrome?
That is so important. First of all, noticing if you think that they are having these kinds of behaviors, don't interpret them as, that they don't care, they don't want to be a team player, they just aren't as invested. Okay. Like, just talk to them one-on-one and say, hey, I noticed that this is kind of what you do at work. And is there, where do you think that comes from? Or what's that about? Like, letting them know what I'd really like is to have us be more of a team player, team working together. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? So asking them, what's under, that you notice certain things and what's that about, and giving them the opportunity to explore. Mm-hmm. Sometimes as a manager, you can just kind of model it. You can just sort of say it like casually at a meeting, hey, I'm sorry, I have a thing with perfectionism. I don't mean to put that on people. Mm-hmm. Just kind of model it. And I'm trying to work on that.
Right.
Using the words, using the terms, and making it a normal thing that we all know this happens.
Yeah.
So normalizing it.
Right. Letting people know that they're, like I said, they're not the only ones. And maybe if they're seeing that their boss, who they think of as successful, has some of those same issues, that may allow them to open up. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Jennifer says, how do you relate IIS? How do you relate imposter syndrome with the love language at work?
Oh, that's very interesting. Love languages are developed as a result of kind of how you grew up and how people showed you love and what you interpreted to be love, like from your parents, mostly from your parents. Okay. A lot of it comes from that. And from maybe your siblings. So, you know, you might be going into work thinking that spending quality time with you shows your boss, if they're spending quality time with you, it means that they think you're doing a great job. Or if they're not giving you a reassurance or spending a lot of time with you or nominating you to do something, it means that, you know, they don't care about you as much. So, I mean, it's a lot of love language has to do with how you interpret how people treat you and whether that shows you that they care about you or not, or they value you. And what you can do, again, is ask and clarify. Communication is so important. You can say to people that you work with, you know, I noticed that I sent you an email and you didn't respond for 2 days. I was just, you know, wondering what that was about, and let them talk about it. Like, talk about this stuff. It really clarifies so that you don't go and interpret it as they don't like me.
Right.
No. I'm thinking of that. You know, there's a lot of other love languages that we wouldn't want at work, right? Like affection or buying gifts and presents. You know, we don't do that at work. So I'm thinking quality time. If that's your love language, you could make more effort to spend more time with people. You know, and you could show them there's nothing wrong with that. And that really helps with breaking down barriers, bonding with people so you trust them better. The more you know them, the more you're going to be able to trust them. And you're going to let yourself feel more comfortable.
Right.
And that helps imposter syndrome.
Okay. All right. We have another question. Once I know what style of imposter syndrome I have, what are the next steps I should take to try to resolve it?
So it depends on what that style is, right? But asking yourself, let's say you feel like you have superhuman or playing it safe, you know, just knowing what you've been doing, and whenever situations come up, just pay attention. The first step is to pay attention to how you're functioning at work, right? And notice when you're playing it safe and say, well, what could I do that would take a small step toward not playing it safe? So try to think of small steps that you can take to be able to step out of your box. If you are nervous about using your voice, telling people your opinion, find somebody that you trust at work and share your opinions. So start small. You don't have to go out into the conference room and tell everybody what you think. So start small to make these changes. And when it comes to like being superhuman or expert, if you feel like you're coming off that way, you could say, I don't know if anybody ever read Positive Intelligence, but Shirzad Chamine talks about he was like that. And people thought that he didn't trust them because he just had to do it all himself. So saying, I don't know, like if you notice yourself wanting to come across like you know everything, even if you do know it, don't be the one that speaks up. Say, you know, I'm not really sure about that. Does anybody else have an idea? And practice and see how that feels and notice how the response you get. And when it comes to being superhuman, think about your projects, everything that needs to be done. Like maybe pick the things that you love doing the most and see if somebody else could do the other things, and let them know, hey, I need some help with this part of the project, so that you're developing those relationships, you're collaborating, and you start to see that it feels good and people still value you. Some of this has to do with trying a new way and seeing how it feels. And because a lot of these fears that we're going to be rejected, or people aren't going to think we're good at what we do, or we're frauds, sorry, I couldn't come up with the word, are irrational. They're all based on irrational beliefs. So once you start to see what really happens, it really takes the power out of it. If you have a hard time with that, then, getting help with a coach or a therapist or a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
That
Suzanne,
can help.
do you recommend that people journal or track both the goals, right? Set themselves some of these types of goals, like let me try, speaking an idea out loud this week, and then sort of tracking the progress. Does that help?
Absolutely. The more you can journal and track, it makes it real. It's very reinforcing. And also we forget, and we have to have a reason why we want to get to that place. You have to have a reason, because otherwise it's very easy and comfortable to stay where you are.
Yeah.
So having a why is really important. And then writing down what your goals are, and then noticing when you do them, write it down. How did it feel? And just track that over the week. You'll start to see, well, maybe I didn't do it, and be compassionate and try again.
Right.
You might need to get accountability, have an accountability partner on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Jennifer asks, how can professional associations provide their member services to confront imposter syndrome?
Well, professional organizations, the ones that I'm part of, we often do a lot of webinars and talks like this, where people can get the information about this and then collaborate and talk about it with each other. So bringing people in to talk about these kinds of topics, and then allowing people to dialogue, maybe break up into small groups and talk about it, is really powerful. That's what I would recommend. I'm not sure if that answers that question.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's what she was asking.
Yeah.
Kim says, why do we have these beliefs if they're not true? Is it our subconscious? That's a pretty deep question, but take a sec.
Well, so much of what we believe has to do with what we all agree is a truth, or something that we should believe in. I know that's another whole rabbit hole, but we are taught certain things, and it becomes so normal when we're growing up that we just think it's the truth. It's real. Like, let's just say that you have a parent who is a perfectionist, and they think that everybody, they project that onto you, and they're constantly trying to get you to improve. And you're going to learn that being perfect is the way to have get your needs met. Because when you are perfect at something, or you think you are as a kid, you get approval from your parents. So that's going to be a belief you have, but it's not really a truth that you have to be perfect to get approval. So that's the difference between a belief and where it comes from, because you've learned it and it's been reinforced for a really long time, versus what the truth is. And that's really a fine line. Like, I work with people who are lawyers and doctors, and they need to get things really right. They need to be really good at what they do, right? A lot of people's lives are at stake, but there's different ways to reframe it and to learn that it's okay to get help. It's okay to have to look things up. So that's the difference between belief and truth.
Gotcha. All right. Matt asks, are men and women equally affected by imposter syndrome?
I think they are. I've been doing some research on that. I think women are more open to talking about it, but I think men also have it. And it particularly comes when you're doing something that's outside your comfort zone, something that you're not used to doing. And I think the reason why more men are having it now is because in the workforce now, men and everybody is expected to be more, have more empathy, show more vulnerability, and communicate about mental health kinds of things a little bit more. And that's not necessarily how men were raised, you know? And so I think they're maybe having a little bit more of a difficult time with that. And that for that reason, I think men might be, and we might be seeing more of that, even more with men now.
Okay.
But I do think they're just as vulnerable as women.
Yeah. Okay. So Jennifer asks, how do you deal with the negative Nellies who are either above you or peer or subordinate in the organization?
I think it's really important to understand why they have a sense of why they're the negative Nelly. If somebody's the negative Nelly above you, like putting everything down, sometimes it's good to make sure, like to acknowledge that they're really good at something, and that you may be wanting to get some feedback from them because you know that they're good at something and that they would have a lot to offer you. Because negative Nellies could be insecurities, you know, somebody who's insecure. And so letting someone know that you value them, it can sometimes help the person be less negative, not to have to like cause as much many waves about it. And then if it's somebody who's like a peer, focus on what you think is good about them, what they're good at. Try to interact with them on that basis. I do think that sometimes you have to just don't let it get to you and focus more on, if you can, on people who are more positive, knowing that this person is negative because of an insecurity. You know, it's just their life view, and give them some compassion in your mind.
Okay. All right, just a couple more. Alice says, educating yourself is a positive thing, but when is this type of self-development enough in terms of an effort to diminish imposter syndrome?
Well, I guess that's an individual decision, right? It depends on how you feel about where you're at in life, you know, and if you feel comfortable with where you're at, and you know you're going to have imposter syndrome some of the time, or you're going to be playing things safe, and it's just about like, is that okay? Sometimes we just have to accept this is who I am, and I've done a lot of work, I've been trying, but I'm okay with that. But some people just always want to keep growing and keep figuring out if there's a way to feel better. So it's really individual. If it's interfering a lot with your work, then I think it's important to try to look at it a little bit more.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Simona asks, for teenagers, how does imposter syndrome relate to being bullied? Is there a cause and effect relationship?
Well, when you get bullied, and especially as a teenager, well, any age, your peers at that point are the people that who tell you basically by their actions how worthy and valuable you are. So when you get bullied by people, kids and peers, it really makes it triggers a lot of feelings about not being good enough, and all sorts of reasons why, right? How you look is really important as a teen. So it could be, it could be triggering I don't look pretty, or I'm not, smart enough, or I'm not athletic enough. And all of that can feel very negative, and it can really have an impact on how you feel about yourself. And you take it with you in life until you figure out, that this is where that came from. And sometimes it's just knowing that helps you to kind of let it go. So that's how the bullying affects imposter syndrome, because that's not wanting people to see who you really are.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Looks like our last question. How can workplace leaders step up to create an environment that discourages imposter syndrome? And I would say not just workplace leaders, but for any of us that are, working with other people, what can we do to create an environment that's least sort of hostile and least likely to encourage people feeling this way.
Yeah. Well, I think that you have to build in times during meetings or specific meetings or specific mentoring opportunities where people get to talk about this stuff, particularly, just share how they feel about where their job and what would help them feel better, like just to really share. And
Mhm.
at a meeting, take some time at that meeting and like let everybody talk about, something personal about themselves. So you're showing people that, you care about them as a person. And the more they see that, the more that they see that you're human, it's okay for
Mhm.
them to be human, like just modeling
Mhm.
being human. Um, I think, and putting in some infrastructure is really important because, you can tell people to do something, but then you have to give them the time to do it.
Mm.
You have to give them the time and the opportunity. Bring in more people talking about stuff, workshops, asking their employees, doing surveys, like what's working for you, what's not,
Mhm.
what would you like help with? Well, how could I be a better leader for you? Just showing them that you are growing and you want to grow and that you want them to grow.
Yeah.
That really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And, recommending, programs like this that focus on professional and personal development lets employees know that you care and that, they recognize these issues. So, so fabulous. Well, I think we are out of time and we are out of questions. So that worked out perfectly.
Perfect.
Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I had some great takeaways. I'm sure everyone else did as well. So good afternoon to all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope to see you back for another webinar in the future.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.